ordinance governing the provision of utilities within the city of Manvel, providing a penalty in an amount not to exceed $2,000 for any violation of any provision of this ordinance, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances inconsistent or in conflict herewith, and providing for severability. All right. And is this a present? Okay, do we have Mr. or Mrs. Perkins in the audience? Right. Then we will read it, having received it online. Sue and Jim Perkins. They live at 6710 Davy Crockett, and they want to make comments in reference to water and wastewater rates. Why are we paying for future expansion when no one is helping us pay our mud tax, which paid for our infrastructure? We were also told several times that our winter sewage usage would be average for our summer rates for those with pools and irrigation systems. Still waiting after 6 years against any increase in water or sewer rates. All right, is there anybody else who would like to speak to the public hearing? Dan Davis.
Well, good evening, Mayor, Council, City staff. For the record, my name is Dan Davis, reside at 6818 Powell Lane. It's been a little bit since I've seen some of y'all, so it's good to see you again. I look forward to your discussion regarding this item tonight. I do want to express, starting off, my appreciation to staff and Freeze and Nichols for their work on this. As was stated during one of our council workshops about why the increase in rates now, the answer that we were given was the utility rates would not lead to an increase until a few years from now if the proposed rates were not to be used to pay for infrastructure expansion into new areas of our city. What this means, that the decision before you tonight will cause current utility ratepayers to see their bills increased to pay for infrastructure that they will not directly benefit from. I'm fully supportive of the pay for what you use model, and I understand that the cost of service increases over time, which leads to the cost of rates increasing. But that's not what this is doing. Tonight, I'm here to urge you to consider a different approach. If the proposed rates are adopted, which will kick off a schedule of yearly rate increases, the proposed rates will be a major factor in residents' decisions to leave Manvel because they won't be able to keep up with the cost of living in this great city. Quite personally, the reason why I'm here tonight and missing my kids' magic show at home is because my wife, my family, and I find ourselves in this decision. We are seeing taxes increase, insurance costs increase, trash costs increase, permit costs increase, debt that's going to be issued, which is going to increase our INS tax rate, and so much more. Out of no desire of our own, we're being forced to make this decision, to consider leaving the city that we love, and I know of many others who find themselves in this exact same position, people who give so much to this community. And it breaks my heart, because what that means is that we start to lose some of our history, and we start to lose what makes this city so special, the people. You're going to have that over time as the city grows. Some people want to leave because they want the privacy of a rural town. But with the cost of living increasing so much, it's forcing people to leave. So you have three choices before you tonight. The first would be delaying the implementations of the rate outright for at least a year to reevaluate when hopefully we get to better economic times. A preferred route would be to delay the implementation tonight to work with Freeze and Nichols to explore what alternate options there are to the rate increases, because what's before you is the only path forward that was presented to us without any alternate options. Or the least preferred choice, in my opinion, is you can approve what's before you tonight, go to the second reading, and there will be ripple effects throughout this community because it doesn't just impact residents, it impacts our businesses, our local mom and pops as well. Now, the question might be raised, how do you pay for new infrastructure with this being the case? So I would just encourage you to work with staff to run a per acre revenue versus cost analysis. And I would expect that you would see that the new growth that's coming more than pays for itself and pays for this new infrastructure to cover the debt issuance, especially when you consider how much money every single year the city puts into the unused fund balance. I understand the desire to be net positive in the utility fund as a standalone fund, but please don't get blinded by statistics and numbers. Understand that there's real people behind those numbers, and the decisions that you make have a real immediate impact on those real people. So in closing, I'll just say with challenges come opportunities, and I believe that you have an incredible opportunity before you tonight. It's not going to be an easy decision because you have to balance the growth with who's here, and I respect y'all for the decisions that you make, but I'd urge you just to pump the brakes a little bit, explore alternate options, and take advantage of the opportunity that's before you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, is there anybody else who would like to speak to this public hearing? Second call. And a third call for anybody who would like to speak. All right, thank you very much. Next, we have public comments. Any comments? Did you receive any? Okay, all quiet on the front. Next, we have city manager's update.
All right, Mayor and council members, I have a couple of items for you tonight. Obviously, our COVID spreadsheet. Since the last council meeting, 7,38 people have been diagnosed with COVID. That's up 208 since the last council meeting. 219 confirmed cases. That's up 61 since the last council meeting. 27 probable cases. That's up 7 from the last council meeting. 6,743 recovered cases. That's up 140 from the last council meeting. And again, no additional people have died from COVID-related deaths or illnesses since the last council meeting. The second thing is, obviously, we're still under a burn ban. The council at the last council meeting extended that for 90 days. I asked Joe, and our fire marshal provided some information on the KBDI index. We're at 633, which is still in the high category. It went down a little bit. Thursday and Friday, we got about 3/4 of an inch measured at the city's rain gauge. It dropped it a little bit, not very much, but a little bit. If I saw on the weather report last night, we're going to be at 102 or higher several days this week. It's not expected any rain, so as a non-fire marshal, I think it's going to be hot and dry, and probably the KBDI index is still going to go up. So that's a couple of things. I wanted to let you also know we had a meeting last week with representatives from Valencia. They submitted a new master plan, or I guess they resubmitted a master plan. It is updated. It does have the school property on it. They revised the traffic impact analysis like Russ had mentioned at the last council meeting. They used a different software program. They looked at the 7 intersections and they seem to work now. We'll still be looking at it. We anticipate it going to PD&Z on next Monday on the 25th, and then coming to you on the 8/1, which is the 1st of August council meeting for you to consider that as well. So if everything seems to be in order, we'll be recommending you approve that. The last thing is I wanted to let you know we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we have one set up for this Thursday with a potential developer of the commercial portion of property at 6 and Meridiana Parkway. If you remember, we entered into an agreement with MUD 57 to provide utilities in that area, and it's a company called Gulf Coast Commercial Group. They're a commercial developer. They've brought some real preliminary drafts of some strip shopping center and other retail along that area on both sides of Meridiana Parkway on the south side of Highway 6. We have another meeting scheduled for Thursday. As soon as we know anything more, obviously I'll let you know. But the good part of that is that for the last several weeks, they've had a sign up on that intersection. So I don't know if they've purchased the property from the Meridiana development yet, but at least if they've got their commercial real estate sign up there, it's a good, positive thing. So as soon as we get more information, then we'll let you know about that. So those are the things I have for you today.
Thank you. All right. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
A second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. All right, we're in the regular agenda. Consideration and possible, action to approve the first of two readings of ordinance 2022-0-21. An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Manvel, Texas, Chapter 71, Utilities, by adopting new rates for water and sewer, making other changes to the ordinance governing the position of utilities within the City of Manvel, providing a penalty in an amount not to exceed $2,000 for any violation of any provision of this ordinance, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances inconsistent or in conflict herewith, and providing for severability.
Mayor and council members. Obviously, this is part of the discussion we had several months ago dealing with impact fees. As several people had mentioned, future development has to be paid for by the city and recouped those expenses from various sources of revenue. Impact fees is one. The city council, we hired Freeze and Nichols to do an impact fee study. They went through the process, came up with a CIP project list, and the ultimate amount that the city could have set that amount at was around $19,000. The city council decided to set it at 50%, which is around $9,100, I believe. The other 50% is still expenses. And obviously those expenses, you can't just build like half of a plant or extend half of a water line in order to do that. The city has to come up with the balance of those things. Part of that discussion was increased in utility rates. I believe the last time the utility rate ordinance was updated was in the 80s. At that time, it was built in. There was a flat amount, a base amount of $20, $25 or $30 for water or sewer for the first 2,000 gallons. And then there was a cost, $2 per 1,000 gallons after that. We asked Freeze and Nichols to come up with a suggested amount in order to cover the cost of the additional cost for the impact fee projects, as well as the other things that we're needing. In your packet, you have a copy of that ordinance. And I want to go straight down to the monthly rates. That was a question that was brought up. The first year, that proposed increase would go from $25 base fee for the first $2,000 of water to $28.36. So an increase of $3.36 a month. Over 2,000 gallons, it would go from $2 per 1,000 to $2.60 per 1,000 gallons. So an increase of 60 cents per 1,000 gallons of water. And then for sewer, it would go from, hang on just a second, let me forward to that. Just a moment. I went too far. Sewer would go from $30 for the first 2,000 gallons to $34.03, an increase of $4.03 for the base, and the same $2 to $2.60 per 1,000 gallons above that for single-family residential. Obviously, there's a little bit higher rate for the more you use, obviously, the more you're going to pay for that. And one of the things, and I'd like to turn it over to Dan and to Richard to give us a little bit more background on it, but those are the areas that we're talking about. This is a one-time ordinance. It doesn't increase it more than one time. There are some plans in the future that utility rates would have to be increased, but this is a one-year, one-time increase in the base rates and in the per gallon usage. So, Mayor, with your permission, I'd like to turn it over to Dan.
Dan?
Sure, and I just to sort of expound on that part of it. In the rate study itself, they put together a projection of what we could expect to see over the next several years, and we talked about that internally. Do we go ahead and adopt that schedule? But it gets confusing. I mean, it's confusing. How do you word that? So, and things could change. We could all of a sudden have 2 Valencias come, or we could have no Valencia, or things could change. So. We thought it best to have this discussion this year. We've not updated rates, Tammy, as long as you've been here, right? Yeah. So it's a relatively a small increase, and it makes sense. Up until this year, we hadn't had enough customers, so the utility fund was hemorrhaging. I mean, you were having to borrow money from the general fund to pay for itself. So this isn't it's not supposed to be a make money account, of course, but it should be flush. It should pay for itself. So all projections, and Richard I'll probably hand it off to him, but all projections are showing that if we do this increase, then that will continue to help us pay for itself. It's really not even paying for anything other than stuff in the utility fund itself. I don't know if I handled that all right. Richard, if you want to rescue me.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to turn on or not. Okay, give it a couple seconds, Chris says. The only thing I wanted to add to it, and I do think Dan mentioned a important point. I'm Richard Weatherly, by the way. I haven't met Councilman Perry, so wanted to with Risa Nichols. So, I think the important point is this is really the rate model that we put together. It's just looking at your projected expenses and determining what do you need to change your rates to cover those expenses. And that's it. It's just a calculation. And so I don't even call it a suggestion on our part. Is we calculated what it would take looking out into the future. And this rate increase that y'all are looking at before is simply to cover that first year's of projected expenditures. And it is a self-sustaining fund. That's one thing you'll use. There's like if I can go back to this slide, I'll show y'all kind of what really that is in 2022, there was a transfer from the general fund to the utility fund. We're not doing that anymore. In the future, it's all just increasing the rate so that the water and sewer pays for the water and sewer. That's really what it's for. Not Chris had a lot of great sales tax and general fund money and billions of dollars and all that sounds great. That's for, is really meant for everything else. I mean, y'all had 50 million here, 50 million there on other things that are not water and sewer. That's what all that stuff will pay for. But the utility fund is meant to pay for the water and sewer projects that you have and the operation of the water and sewer department as well. All those things are going up as well. I agree that the idea of what is it going to be next year. We have a calculation based on what we knew last fall, but I believe the mayor mentioned something about interest rates in the previous discussion. We had our assumptions from last fall when we did this rate model. Those are changing, more than once a quarter nowadays. So one of our recommendations is to keep this updated. Like before y'all look at what the next increase needs to be, we can just update the model, come back, give you all the new numbers. Right now, I think it's, y'all are changing too much to say, this is what, thou shalt do over the next 10 years. It's just going to change too much. So that's all I wanted to add. And I guess I did bring up that, it is something to be sensitive about of, what are our rates set at? What are they going to be? Is it going to be too expensive? I can't speak for ourselves as we are doing other rate studies for other cities close by. A lot of other cities are also increasing their rates as well, but we did do this benchmarking for you as we do for all of our clients as part of these studies. So this is for your kind of the typical summer usage, the 10,000 gallon a month. Y'all are on the this is what a monthly bill would be over the summer. Y'all are kind of on the lower spectrum, and this increase would move you to just into the middle. So even relative to your peer cities and your benchmark cities, we're not taking y'all to a level that is, above everybody else, and not even into the top mark as well. So that was the only reason why I brought my laptop up here.
Thank you, Richard. And at the table, can we talk about what is the correlation between, in my case, regrettably, placing the impact fee where we did and how this correlates to this rise?
I think when we looked at all those future projects, future expenditures, you had, the maximum number that Kyle mentioned, the $19,000 number, that would essentially would have covered all of the growth-related projects, capital project cost that we had projected in the city. That is the majority. That is more than a majority of the costs that y'all have to spend, because y'all aren't fixing a lot of things right now. Y'all are building new projects. So it happened to be that most of y'all expenditures that we're projecting are new projects. So that impact fee, option was to just put it all on the developer and not on the existing ratepayers. There's balances to that, as y'all talked a lot about, and the balance y'all struck was at that 50% mark. So, that impact fee also we benchmark. That, at that time, the impact fee that y'all were going to is on the higher tier. It again is, I think we even mentioned that they would be going in that direction. Y'all are already shifting into the middle tier based on all these other impact fee updates as well. Because again, everything is getting more expensive. And so these, both impact fees and rates are really just meant to cover costs. They're not meant to make money, which I think Dan had just mentioned. So
Right.
just a function of that.
Doing business. Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Just to add to the conversation, so when we decided to only put half on the developer and that we would take care of the other half, we still have another portion that we have to pay to finish everything on our list. Could you clarify, Kyle and Chris and Dan, where the rest of that money is going to come from? Because I know this is going to, and again, this includes not just Lakeland, it includes everybody who's touching our wastewater treatment and our water, correct?
All of the current city utility customers, yes.
All the current,
Yes.
not just.
Like I was saying, the utility impact fee projects, the impact fees are going to pay for half of those costs. So new development is paying for half of it. But because we decided to set it only at 50%, the balance has to be made up other places. This utility increase will help pay for that as well. Again, we have to come up with the other 50% because we set the impact fee at only 50%.
So where are we getting that other?
I mean, a great example is the wastewater treatment plant, water reclamation facility. So those millions of dollars that thing is going to cost is in our impact fee study. So that's a portion of it gets, funded by impact fees, which is directly relates to the new impact of the system. Whatever that can't support, now we zoomed out to sort of all the ratepayers for the city. So not Rodeo Palms, for instance, not South Fork or whatnot. Yeah. When that can't support it, now it obviously expands out and zooms out to all of the property tax owners, right? So we just keep widening the pool, if you will, of who's helping to pay for it. So try and get everything that we can from the impact to the system first and foremost, and then zoom out to who it actually impacts as current users, which would be your rates, and future users. And ultimately, there's only one pool left, and that's all of our ratepayers.
So where are we going to get the rest of the money? Yeah, Chris. I feel like we've talked about it, and we're just like bringing it up a little bit about where we could get big pools of money.
What I mentioned earlier.
I get what you're saying, but like.
Yeah, so what I mentioned earlier is you're talking about a utilities fund this year that doesn't need a transfer in from the general fund finally. So that's at old rates. So we are paying for what we need to take care of with the old rates. So next year, if these rates go up to what we're anticipating, now you're looking at a surplus from the water department, which would probably then be transferred to the or not debts, to impact fees to help pay the deficit that's coming from it. So
Exactly.
what Dan is saying is the water customer's going to pay for it. You're going to see it as an excess in the utility revenues, which gets transferred into the impact fees to actually pay for all these projects that we're doing. That's where the money's actually coming from.
But it's not enough. We needed
The impact-
20,000 a person, now we got 10.
Yeah, the
So
impact
where's the other
fees-
10 coming from?
That's the thing. The impact fees weren't enough.
They weren't,
The
so-
extra revenue that you're seeing from your water bill is going to have to supplement that. That's where you're seeing it coming from.
The answer to her question is these rates. 50% of that expenditure.
Okay, we'll cover everything, right? Okay, now, I apologize, I just need to hear it like clearly in my head. That is going to cover everything. We don't have to raise, we don't know what we're gonna have to do later, depending on what the expenses are, but this will cover that other 10.
This will cover the water and sewer related impact fee projects.
Okay.
There are other things in there that aren't paid for by that, by the increase in utility rates.
And if y'all forgive me, I was just hearing it in my head or thinking of the 20. And so 10's coming from new development, so this is the other 10.
Yes.
That's when I just wanted to be clear, so it's,
Historically, there's been that's what Dan was mentioning, is there was a third way.
A third
and that was
way.
taxes. This calculation says impact fees or water and sewer rates pay for water and sewer.
and we don't have to go into property taxes to pay for any of
That's
this.
what he is saying,
We're good.
Only for the water and sewer
Only
projects.
for the water and sewer projects. Yes, only for the water and sewer projects,
Yes.
because I do recall for years being here that poor Lakeland is always in red, and finally we're all in the black, so, okay. I just wanted to make that clear and be clear in my head that we're making it for that other 10, and this is how we're gonna do it, or how we need to do it if we do it this way.
Let me throw another monkey wrench in there. So as we come up with more development, as Valencia goes online, are we anticipating staying at these rates? Or these rates fluctuating how?
they will be updated at least every 5 years. Oh, sorry, rates or impact fees?
Rates.
Oh, rates. So rates, I think at the end of the day, you'll evaluate where these rates get you every year, just like, Chris always is looking last year, what we project this year and next year. Eventually, if we try to keep a reserve of 2.5 months, it's 20%, so I assume 2.5 months in a reserve. But if your reserve climbs too much, that probably means your rates are too high. But and so then that would entail projects getting cheaper, chemicals getting cheaper, electricity getting cheaper, things that don't usually happen.
Exactly. And with the impact fees only being set at 50%, it's not likely. Yeah.
Mayor, if I could, so in one of your tables in the study, it showed that this year is like a 13.4% increase. And then next year, if all stays according to what we think, or according to what we're projecting, it's another 14% or so increase. So it's kind of steep to play a little bit of catch up. Because again, we've never upped our rates at all. So we're not doing it all at one time. But then it potentially could flatten out to like 5 or 6%, even 2% after that. So it depends on what development does. But
Yeah, but that makes sense.
right now it's showing kind of a true up almost. And then it should flatten out.
I would add, just for an option for y'all, or in the future, is, some cities choose, like in the past 20 years, they might have been doing like 2% bumps, 1, 2, 3% bumps. Some people choose that route. Some people do 0 for like 10 years or whatever, like y'all did, and some other cities do that. The cities that do choose the 0 are kind of leading to larger increases, whereas the ones that do invest that 1 to 2% increase every year, they might follow the consumer price index or something like that. I think that's what one of your neighbors does at a minimum, and then they have smaller increases. So if y'all like the concept of none, then big, or y'all can do little and not as big of increases. That's something to consider when those years do come, when you could do a 0. You could bump them up like 1 or 2% and save the bigger, larger increases for another time.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve? Everybody, come to the party.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the motion.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? And the motion carries 5-2. Thank you. All right, and our second and last item is discussion on the sign ordinance and the definition of signs, requested by council members Tyson and Hain.
Yeah, so I just wanted to discuss this. This did kind of stem from the weekly situation. I just had a few people reach out, and I definitely wanted to get some clarity on what exactly happened there. And then as I started reading through the sign ordinance, I just felt like it could be a little clearer. Just in some of the definitions, definitely covers a lot, but even as I was reading through it, I just felt like there were some ways we could define things better, particularly like in this situation. I felt like, in my mind, I know that it's read differently, but a sign is something that has the business's name on it and is clearly stating what the business does versus something that's more for advertisement or for purposes of, like we've talked about, basically saying, here I am over here, or some type of attraction for a business. And I thought that was kind of got lost inside of there. Even though it covered it, I just felt like it got lost. In this particular situation, too, I felt like this is not so much come to my business as more of a characteristic of that particular business. It kind of like what she had said earlier, the mayor had said about us trying to keep that charm of the older city. I mean, that is kind of something people like to drive by. So what could we do? Is there anything we could do to try and put something in there to, for businesses that fall into that category, be able to preserve that in a way?
Okay, thank you. Anybody? Yes, sir?
Maybe the chief can give some background.
You got some background, Chief?
I don't know if I have any background, but I've done a lot of reading today on signs, and I know a little bit more about signs than I really care to know when it comes to that. But there's, I looked at several other cities and the ordinances several other cities have, and the definitions of sign, wind-blown devices and such as that is fairly the same throughout a lot of the cities' ordinances that I've read. One of the cities, to lean towards what Councilmember Tyson is talking about, is something that Sugarland has. They have in their ordinance that you can only use these type of signs or a balloon. They call them a balloon sign. Twice a year, 28 days, or you can split it up into two 14-day sections, permitted sign. But most of the other ones I've looked at, and I've looked at Lake Jackson, Angleton, League City, Webster, Missouri City. Tried to pull Galveston's up for some reason. I couldn't get connection with their Muni code, but I was looking at the different cities, larger cities, different sizes such as that. But when you look at the majority of the ordinances that I looked at, most of them prohibit this type of sign, and they call them a sign. It's basically a sign. It's a device. It's something that businesses use to attract attention. So it's one of those things we can look at. Yes, do we want to look at something of this nature, or do we want to continue with the ordinance that we have in place right now that provides for a direction for the city to grow. I mean, how do we want the city to look in 5, 10, 15 years? Do we want to change the ordinance now to meet a definition, or to even, to look at a better definition of it? And then 6 years later, another council comes in and says, we don't like that, we're going to change it, which that's fine. That's what laws do. I mean, people, legislatures and council members or city councils, they look at different ordinances and they change them as time changes. You know, that's perfectly acceptable, and we can do that. I just need to know the direction that we want to go, what we want to look at. If we want to better define what the balloon sign is in our ordinance, if we want to better look at it, then we can by all means do that. What direction do we want to go and how do we want to proceed? But most of the ordinances that I've read and looked at, like I said, I've read about 7 of them today, and they probably 90% of them prohibit these types of signs. And you know, like I said, that's what they call them. They are signs. I know they don't have writing on them, but it's a way to attract attention to that business. And they are prohibited in a lot of cities. It's just the direction that y'all would like to see.
Why are they prohibited?
I'm going to defer to her on this one.
Okay, Jessica, it's all yours.
I'll take it over. They're prohibited, they're attention-getting devices that can be distracting while you're driving. It's the same reason why municipalities, if they permit them, will regulate those electronic meter board, message readers, where you may not have any sort of like movement that occurs very often. You definitely wouldn't have any spinning, but they'll regulate like the movement of that message every so often, and then also the brightness of it too. It's one of those things that unless you like see it, you're like, hey, that's just kind of out of place. But typically an ordinance that's done well, you'll never even notice that, you know, an electronic message board and such could be distraction, but it's because they're distracting. The other thing too is, as a community, what do you want to see? What communities want their community to look like? Do you want more clutter? Do you want more sign clutter and perhaps things that are, you know, driving along on a corridor? For a few years, I worked as a consultant, and I did everything basically on a unified development code side, or basically on ordinances. In every community that I worked with in the Houston area, the first thing they would tell us as consultants when redoing their ordinance, we do not want to look like FM 1960. In every possible way, because you know it when you see it, right? You know that too. You have a visual in your mind, and that's it. So that's why you see that basically you have all these municipalities, and that's what gets adopted, because it's a vision of how you want to see, how you want your city to look and how you want those messages to be regulated. So we do them according to sign types. We probably could, I agree, like beef up some of these definitions on here. It's on my to-do list. Because for me, as you know, reading through this, there are things that I read multiple times, and I shouldn't have to read them multiple times to get the gist of what it is. But I think we have a good ordinance, but can we build it up? Yes, we definitely can build it up.
Okay, Chief?
I just had one more thing, that this is actually out of our ordinance, and it kind of helps answer the question that you just asked. It's, you know, the 53-1, the purpose of the chapter is to establish reasonable regulations for design, construction, installation, and maintenance of all exterior signs within the city and extraterritorial jurisdiction in order to, number one, and this is a key part, balance the right of individuals to identify their businesses and convey their message, and the right of the public to be protected against the unrestricted proliferation of signs. That's the balance we have to find. And that's what we need to do. Is the balance there, or do we need to look at a different way or a different language that would help in that?
Okay. Anybody else?
And I don't know how you balance it, but I understand why we did it when we did it, and when the matter came to me, I knew the ordinance was the ordinance. It's in there, even though the wacky wild, whatever the hell they call this guy, isn't specifically called out, but it's in there, clearly in there. But I don't know how we can balance that in this particular instance, if it feels more like this is a mascot thing than a sign that I didn't find distracting, and I drive by it at least twice a day, most days. So I don't know where we find that balance, but would I feel the same if every business up and down Highway 6 had one? Probably not. So I don't know where or if we find that balance, but.
Yeah, that's where the trick lies. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, because I don't know how you can make that distinguishment whenever it's considered a sign and not necessarily, I guess, maybe like a mascot or somebody that would be out there. Some regulations kind of go further with like people who actually wear the sandwich boards or perhaps that, might stand out in front of a business. A lot of what you see, if you do have some leeway in some cities, is as Chief mentioned, it's allowed for a certain time out of the year. Sometimes 14 days out of the year, not necessarily consecutively, but it's not something that you would see on a permanent basis. It's on a temporary basis. You allow those things like for maybe grand openings of businesses. Your wind device signs are also those little like flappy things you like see a lot sometimes at a gas station. Have you ever seen some of those that have been up for a few years? They look horrible. There's really, there's not much longevity to those types of things. So with time, even though you may allow them, they're just going to look bad after a certain time because they're not meant to be permanent. So I would just say that. And then also, those balloon signs sometimes that you see on top of a building or in a parking lot, like that's all sort of within here of things that you could allow. It is a bit, if you do allow them on a temporary basis, can be a bit of a code enforcement issue because everybody wants their signs. Everybody wants a bigger sign. Everybody, needs to know kind of where all that is. So just sort of keep that in mind if you're going to present, I guess, any leeway with this.
Is Weekly's considered inside of that old Manvel town site area?
No, I don't believe so, because it only goes up to large.
Okay. Because I was going to say something like that is what came to my mind would be, we make exceptions in certain ways of how things are built or how things are posted in that. And maybe that's just something, because I know whenever I had spoken with a few, with Chief and Kyle, that it was, we can't make an exception for one person and then put the standard on everyone. But that's exactly what we did with the old Manvel town site. So I think that's one thing. Another thing would be if it's a safety issue, there was language in here about, not putting it too close to a corner or anything that or like that. Is there anything they can do, on a setback from the road that you would not consider it anymore like a advertisement sign or anything like that? More of just the people who come to the business. That's just something that they like to see when they're there. That makes sense.
I think you would have to have an
Still considered
an allowance for it.
It's still considered a sign, and we do not provide any other allowances for such with it. So
Yes, ma'am.
Why is, I'm of the opinion that I don't want to put anything on code enforcement that isn't very clear and dry, because she has a lot to do. I would have no problem with just taking out this definition altogether for wind devices. The only thing I care about when it comes to the city and the aesthetic as a whole is that they're not tattered. So if she sees one and it's tattered, she could say, you need to take it down and replace it. But if it's bringing attention to a business and it doesn't have any advertising on it, we have other things to do, and so does she. But that's just me, just saying. That's the only thing that I feel would make a statement is leave the definition of the sign, take out wind device signs, and just that definition of what they are alone. And again, the only thing I'm concerned about as the aesthetics of the city is bring attention to your business. Don't let it be tattered, because code enforcement will make you tear it down.
Have you been down 1916?
I have, but I mean, we're talking about looking at all the little businesses that we have right now. I mean, it would take a massive amount of everyone putting them all out to make us look weird, and I'm trying to use nice words. I can't think of any. That's just my opinion. I think that she has.
Jessica?
My opinion, then she could look and say, fine, as long as it's not ugly, I'm gonna walk away. She has a lot of things to do.
Well,
That's
so-
just what I think.
But there's judgment now that's involved in code enforcement rather than a regulation. So my
If this
judgment,
definition isn't here, she could just say, oh, it doesn't apply. Just a thought.
my definition of something being worn and tattered may be a bit different than somebody else. It's subjective, I guess, is what I'm saying. The definition's black and white and says what it is. And I think that's saying that you don't think there would be a lot of this in the city is very much it's very much underestimated, I guess is what I can say, because that is the one thing. I mean, yes, everybody pushes on everything, but on signs, it's a push, it's a push, it's a push. You open the door and they will take it like a sidewalk. If you build it, they will come. You allow them, they will come.
And I did read in here, though, that it has to be in good standing. Did I read that correctly? Like, the actual item has to be in working order, it can't be, did I read that somewhere? It has to be,
With signs in general, we talk about maintenance of sign and being
I care about that's just me, just my opinion. I care about pole signs, I don't want any of those. I don't care if all of those get cut down. I care about things that look tattered and things that need to be rebuilt. The EDC helps businesses grant them money to remove their pole signs and put monuments and help them out financially with that, so we don't put that burden on small businesses trying to get ourselves uniform. But just looking at all these definitions, if there's no advertisements on it and it's cute, and I don't see a problem with bringing, hey, I'm here. And I'm not talking about the wacky wailing inflatable man. I'm just talking about just in general. People have banners and they do that. And I feel like this is kind of like garage sales. We put it in writing just to say that you can't have 1 billion of them, but nobody's really having 1 billion of them. But I don't know, again, that's just what I think, to make it easy so that businesses can bring attention to themselves, just doing the definitions.
What about the laws that govern, I mean, I'm just asking questions at this point also, but, nobody has really addressed the distraction issue. I mean, this is across the street from a high school where kids are distracted in general. And we have traffic laws that prevent distractions on roads. And, I mean, I personally, and I think this is part of the problem. I mean, it's personal. I mean, who doesn't love Wacky Willie or whatever his name is? I mean, everybody does. But if it's going to cause a problem and it's going to upset the balance of the standard that we're trying to set for our city, I'm going to have to say no. I mean, it doesn't. It's kind of hard to believe we're doing this.
Well, City of Houston did it for 4 hours.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's a reason enough right there.
so in your argument for the school, that it's a hallway, the windows there are a hallway. So if they get to look at something nice, then I'm okay with that. What if this wasn't a sign and this was a playground element? I mean, there may be a way to I don't know how we could set standards of playground stuff. Then we don't have to worry about the Highway 6 issue, quote unquote. But I mean, again, knowing this particular sign as I do, it is less of a sign, though it is by definition, as it is an element of the picnic area and the playground and the toys and stuff that the people are playing with, so it's much less of a sign. And again, for lack of a better term, it's a mascot. So is there a way that we can regulate the playgrounds?
Yeah.
Then it's not a sign?
With
I
signs,
had
yes, we
originally
would.
thought, you know,
We
I
would
had
actually
originally
regulate
thought
the
if we
ground.
could put him, you know, for him, look, it's already got an identity for me. If we could put him further back on the property where he's not that, you know, visual distraction for the already distracted, you know, that was something that occurred to me. But
We have to decide whether we're going to continue to consider him a sign or we're going to consider it something else. Because if it's a sign, it
Definitely,
doesn't matter
yeah.
how far off we put it because it's prohibited.
So
If it's not a sign, then
this was always a code enforcement issue. It was just never proactively addressed. So it has been allowed to be there for a good amount of time.
I pointed that out when it was brought to my attention.
So,
Away with it.
this probably, yeah, this should have been addressed when it first went up. How we have, you know, really great proactive code enforcement right now. I honestly have not worked with the city or talked with anybody with the city that distinguishes what you're describing as far as mascot or signage or whatever. I have not. I don't even know where we go in that. And when the next businesses come in and want the same thing, however that's defined and the decision that's made, that's how we move forward. So if we've got 30 of these around the city, we're going to have 30 of these around the city because I would want one of the, right? I'd want one of these if I had a business because I want everybody wants everybody to see that business.
And I would not object to 30 of them if 30 businesses put in a private park. I mean, it's what it is. That's what the front of this building is. It's 6 or 8 picnic tables under a bunch of trees and games. It's the very definition of a park that the city doesn't have to pay for. Outside the box
I
is all.
think that was where I was kind of trying to get at, was the fact that when you read through this, it's just not easy to define. You know, even though there are the wind pieces, pennants, it covers all of those different things. And it even goes into new businesses, because I was trying to dig, you know, grand openings, when people want to do what says on, you know, the purpose that he had read off. He said the balance, but it also said promote economic development. So it's saying that we're going to encourage people to be able to come in. I don't think at this point that's what Weeklies was using that for, but it just isn't well defined. I don't even think they got really a clear idea of exactly where it fell in. And I actually highlighted several of them that I thought portable sign, different things that it could probably fall under. So if that was just clear. And then the code enforcement piece is interesting because actually recently I was in a meeting talking about a city promoted event where I was told that we weren't allowed to use any promotion or advertising signage by the road. But when I read through this, it said I could for 30 days leading up to the event. And so bottom line, it's just not clear, you know?
Next time you can talk with me, and I could have told you we had that 30-day in there. We also allow bandit signs up on weekends from Friday afternoon till first thing Monday morning. We do restrict how many you can have because it's based on a distance. I'm the one that is in this sign code day in and day out. I'm the one that does the approvals on the sign permits day in and day out. So if something looks atrocious out there, it's not my fault because we only look at sign types. That is how we approve signs, or sign types. There's heights, there's measurements. That's it. As, you know, I'm not even really supposed to, you know, look at it really. I mean, on there, I mean, there's a lot of, with the content and everything. So that's how cities regulate or municipalities regulate, is based on a type. You define that type, and then you also say how large that sign area could be, if there's a height associated with it. With our wall signs, you can only have a certain percentage of that wall with a sign because we don't want it to be too big. Our monument signs, we allow allowances for height. Obviously, our larger heights are allowed on Highway 6. And like the 288 corridor, anything beyond that, those signs get smaller. They get smaller, so they're not as obtrusive because they're not on a major roadway. So I think, you know, when it comes to like our allowance of, you know, how we do signs, I think it's pretty on par with like how other cities do it. We get in a little bit into the weeds, but not crazy. I mean, the last city I worked for, the table for our signs was 12 pages. 12 pages of a table of how the signs were regulated, and that's pretty much the norm for most cities. We're pretty like, I'm not gonna say lax, but it's like percentages, height, and area, and sign type, and that's pretty much it. We don't get into the weeds too bad with this.
So Nicole, is your ask that we take a look at the ordinance?
Yeah,
general.
that's
Is
pretty
that-
much just it. I
that
want
your
to, I would love to find some kind of solution for that. Like, you know, he has really good ideas about maybe creating a separate sign type. It just leaves so much, even how she's saying that, the 12 pages sounds more specific in the sense that whoever's going out there to determine something's not supposed to be there, it would be easier to, you know, say that. Because I only brought up the code enforcement thing was because that's the person I was talking, the person who went out and regulated told me that.
Right.
So if they're unclear, then maybe we just need to, you know, that'll just help all around.
In the event she is possibly unclear on something like that, since I'm the one that's in this day in and day out, her and I would have a discussion. And 9 times out of 10, a discussion is had before she'll even go back out there and like tell that property owner something if she's a little bit unsure. Because the last thing we want to do is like rush to judgment and tell somebody you can't have this or you can't do that. I'll tell you, our code enforcement officer does not do that.
Well, then, yes, my ask is just that we possibly look at this, you know, divide some things up a little bit more, make it more clear, and
Okay. Lorraine, did you have something else?
I just wanted to make a comment, if it even matters. And I was hearing Jessica, and with all that she goes through just for this, it would just be better for enforcement and just get rid of the definition of the wind device signs and move on. I feel like we're wasting, I don't think we're wasting time, sorry. And I know you are very detailed. I'm not going to use the word picky ever again, and I appreciate that you are very detailed. But we are a growing city. This is not something that is, I get the distraction thing. I don't get the distraction thing. I think people should be able to bring stuff. Nobody's writing anything on it. It's just, and it could be this, it could be any of these things that make everybody come to, you know, bring people to your business that are not that big of a deal if they are just maintained. And that's what I think, just remove the definition, be done with it. Just my thought.
Okay. Anybody else? I mean, is there anybody that, I mean, I think it's, I mean, if we're going to address, if the direction is to ask staff to take a look at the sign ordinance again, then, and make things more clear, it doesn't necessarily mean to take things out if you don't find that to be a good policy. And that's, I think if then when you come back with having made things more clear and you have, because you're in the business of this, like you said, day in and day out, then I guess at that point we can give some instruction or take a vote on who wants that to happen. But I think if the ask is just to make it more clear, that does not mean necessarily to take this particular issue out.
Honestly, I would recommend more definitions to the sign types to beef them up instead of removing them. I understand where you're coming from, but for me, on like a technical aspect of things, as any reviewer of this code, you've got to have parameters on this. Does this check the box? Does this not check the box? Because there's really there's no gray area, obviously, when we're doing things on the administrative side with it. So, but if, like I said, if anything, it would just be a beefing up of this with more more definitions, because any city that I've worked with, when redoing a sign ordinance or a sign code, that's really what they want. That's really what helps, like, provide some clarity in how that ordinance is implemented.
Sorry, last comment. I think that's good. I do want to make sure that with whatever, or I want to try and have the caveat of that situation kind of considered, because we are building things for the future, yes, for the growth, but a lot of what we talk about is preservation and what it's going to look like here. And a lot of people look at that business, even though it hasn't been here for as long as some of the other ones, as just that. And I think that if we could find some way, if there's any way you can look into anything that we could maybe figure out how to help them out in that way, I think that would be great.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna have to, like, call people that are in actual consulting still and find out what ideas are out there, because what y'all are saying, and I get, trying to get in that meeting of the middle, I have no ideas how to make that right. It's trying to put a round peg in a square hole right now. So I'll try to lean on some people who are a lot smarter than me and like signs a lot more than I do, and see what I come up with.
We appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Do I have any council comments? Anything coming up we want to talk about? No? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I guess it's me again. I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
All right. All those in favor? Motion carries 7-0.